Dear ladies and gentlemen, in the design thinking process, after you have tried to understand your stakeholders, the next phase will be to ideate and evaluate solutions. The outcome of this phase is that you ideate possible solutions for the stakeholder needs you have identified in the first phase. And in the next step, it's compulsory to evaluate the solutions you have ideated and to make a clear decision what of the solutions which are possible and which address properly the user needs you want to prototype. As an example, for my case study with the aim of reducing the number of individual motorized drivers in Stuttgart, I have provided you here an example of stakeholder needs. Stakeholder needs of default motorists who need flexibility to come and go when commuting to and from work. The needs of the municipal government, needs of the city residents, and also needs of the urban transport providers. And these needs are very different. And therefore, your task is to focus on a primary stakeholder group like the default motorists and to ideate possible solutions for them, but also take into account what the needs of the other stakeholders are. In order to categorize a bit the strategies you can employ to ideate solutions, we can categorize ideation strategies according to two parameters. The first parameter is the level of innovativeness of ideation strategies. On the one hand side, you can view existing solutions and try to improve them. And I will show you the strategies according to two different examples. It's Moja and Uber. But you can also create disruptive ideas, and that means that you go away from the existing solution and try to rethink out of the box how you can address user needs better than what is existing. So this is a categorization of ideation strategies according to the level of innovativeness. The second level is how systematic are you approaching your solutions. On the one hand side, you can employ a targeted problem solving, which means you go systematically in a problem solving mode through the problem, in that you differentiate the problem or your needs into sub-problems and try to solve them and evaluate them if your problem-solving strategy really represents a solution which addresses the user's needs. The other method is not so systematic. It's called serendipitous discovery of solutions. And this has more to do with engaging with the stakeholders and come to an idea without a systematic procedure. And both is possible in innovation management. And I will also show you two examples of that. So that's just in order to bring a bit order into the methods you could employ for the ideation phase. So one example, so imagine if the traffic situation in Stuttgart, where we have around 600 to 700,000 commuters a day, is not due to the fact that a lot of city inhabitants in Stuttgart use their cars, but it's more due to the situation that a lot of commuters coming from outside use their car. That means if you try to segment the city in three categories: the city center, the suburban areas, and then the villages outside the city, the problems which are faced by many of work commuters is that they have kind of a fragmented travel. So they have to change many times, use their car, if they use the train, they come into the city and then they have to change the vehicle mode to taxi services or public transport, which is very timely, which costs a lot of time, and which is also quite costly. And this is one of the reasons that this takes long, costs a lot of money, and is very fragmented, that a lot of commuters commuting inside the city use their car. If this is the problem, you might modeling the problem according to what is already known from logistics, DHL and other freight companies, and they segment the logistics transport into three different categories. There is the pre-run, where you, for example, drop a parcel in a DHL station, and then they bring all the parcels to a central hub, and then there starts the main run, also to another hub, and then it's distributed in the post run to the other stations of DHL. So it might be that the problem of reducing the number of cars, of individual cars in Stuttgart, has not so much to do with the main run, so the backbone of the city, but rather with the pre-run and the post-run, which means that commuters have to go to the station, and from the station bridge also then the miles to their workplace and back. And since this is quite costs a lot of time, that's the reason why they use their car. And in order to minimize then the number of cars in Stuttgart, you have to provide a solution for the last mile, for the pre-run and the post-run, not so much for the main run. So, and one solution ideation method for doing this could be the value proposition analysis. If you have modeled the stakeholder gains and pains and the customer jobs in the prior phase, when you understood the stakeholders, you might have experienced the customer jobs that a user has to get to the station by car, that he has to find a parking space, which is hard in the rush hour. He has to find a train, in the train find a seat, then get off to the station and get to the final destination. This is what I mean by fragmented journey. And he experienced a lot of pains in this process, in this so-called customer journey, infrequent public transport, unreliability of public transport vehicles, which causes delays, then a lack of parking spaces at the station, the cost issue, the long travel time, and so on. And a targeted problem-solving strategy would then demand that you address especially the pains commuters experience when they're commuting to work by public transport by a solution, like a shuttle, an on-demand shuttle system with a kind of attractive pricing, since the shuttle can contain between 5 and 9 persons. The pricing could be less than a taxi. That you might provide working spaces with Wi-Fi in the shuttle and so on. And this is one of the possibilities you can ideate solutions in order to bridge the last mile by providing an on-demand last mile service. And this on-demand last mile service bridges also a gap which is existing at the moment, because on the one hand side we have conventional public transport like rail, rapid transit, express buses and conventional buses, and we have taxis. The benefit of taxis is there is no waiting time and it's a door-to-door transport, but quite costly. The benefit of public transport is it's less costly, but the disadvantage is it has only a few destinations and doesn't provide a door-to-door service. And this is the niche in which demand responsive transport, this is the gap which demand responsive transport services could fill. And there are then a few options you can choose of in order to design this last mile on demand service. So you can choose according to the route, if it's fully flexible or it's fixed, then many-to-many, origin destination patterns, or one-to-one, if you have a fixed timetable or on demand timetable and so on. So you have a few design options to design your mobility solutions or your on-demand service, and to choose among these different options, it's called morphological box, which is an idea generation method. One of the examples, one of the companies who have introduced 2 years ago such an on-demand service in Hanover and in Hamburg is Moja. This is a spin-off of Volkswagen, and they are currently in the pilot phase of providing an on-demand taxi service. And I just want to give you a short impression of this service.
Some of today's biggest problems are created by empty seats. But in a world that doesn't like sharing, how do you persuade people to fill these empty seats? You rethink everything. You remove the barriers. You maximize the quality of time spent on the seat. You make finding one easy and minimize the amount of time waiting. And because the ride is shared, we can reduce congestion of our cities by 90%, with a price cheaper than a taxi. By doing this, we'll return cities to the people, one seat at a time. Introducing Moja, social movement.
Okay, such demand-responsive transport services have been developed by employing ideation methods like targeted problem solving. They identified niches in the market, which on the one hand side addresses user needs, and on the other hand side differentiates from competitive services like car sharing or public transport, and also individual motorized transport. Another example which has a different history of origin for demand responsive transport services is Uber, which is quite well known, but it has developed in a different way. So it has not developed by employing a targeted problem solving, but rather a serendipitous discovery of solutions. Yeah. So the founders faced a problem, got an idea, and developed this idea further and further. I also give you an impression how Uber started.
Uber is a worldwide transportation company. It allows its users to press a button on their app and a taxicab will turn up for them. The story of Uber is coming up. Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp were waiting in the snow on a Paris evening in 2008. After having trouble hailing a cab down, the two entrepreneurs came up with the idea of an app that can be used to request a car. Originally called Uber Cab, the company was founded in 2009 and the app was launched to the public in May the following year. By September, they were getting positive press coverage, and in October they raised $1.25 million in funding. Later that month, the name was simplified to just Uber. Up until this point, Uber had only been available in San Francisco, but in May 2011 they officially expanded into New York City. Within 6 months they had expanded into 4 more American cities and began its international expansion by moving into Paris. Since then, it has gone on from strength to strength and is now a worldwide service operating in well over 500 cities in 70 countries and counting. Uber's success is at least in part due to their ability to solve a real-world problem that people face every day, not being able to get a cab. As the cliche goes, sometimes the greatest ideas are the simplest.
So the interesting story behind Uber is how this idea developed. So it hasn't been a targeted problem solution process, but rather what is called a lean startup process at the moment. So there was an idea, and this idea of the two founders stemmed from a problem. So they were waiting for a taxi in Paris and they didn't get a cab. So what they did is they rapidly built a prototype which was called Uber Cab, consisted of a very basic app and 2 vehicles, in order to validate the idea, if the idea really worked, if it was marketable. So they didn't make a big business plan or documented lots of papers what the business case was, but they built very rapidly an app and employed 2 vehicles in order to test their ideas. And by testing it with real users, they get data and they got the learning experience that this was a solution which really was viewed by users as a solution to problems they had, because not getting a cab or not being able to pay the price for a cab is a very common problem. And then they learned about this and developed their service further. And today, Uber is a worldwide company, as it was said in the video, with very different ride services, so in different categories, and they don't only provide ride and drive services, but they expanded their business model to Uber Eats, delivering food, Uber Freight, delivering freight parcels, Uber Business, which provides solutions for companies. They also engaged recently in Uber Bike, so renting electric bikes. And their plan is also to invest in Uber Elevate, which means more flying services, personal flying services. So Uber means also it's an improvement of existing solutions. So it's the solution between public transport and taxis, so improving both services, finding a market niche, but in a different way, by experiencing a problem, building a prototype, validating the prototype, and developing the service further. So a different method of ideation, solution ideation. The next, or the opposite, is what I call, or what is called in innovation management, disruptive ideas. So ideas which really disrupt existing solutions. And in my point of view, the mobility as a service solution, it can be categorized or can be viewed as a solution which disrupts the model of individualized motorized transport. As you can see here in this graph, so we still have a mobility model at the moment of individualized motorized transport. This is also modeled in a scheme which is called automotive dependency. So you can evaluate cities according to their level of automotive dependency. So which spaces in cities are devoted to individualized motorized transport. The next step would then be moving from individualized owning of a car to multimodal journey planning and shared mobility. And we are currently on the way that these kind of mobility models are evolving. And with respect to the future, this could be further developed in kind of seamless transaction models, seamless payments for mobility, dynamic journey management, which also takes into account delays, and personalized travel services. So with the vision that a user living in a city or also living outside the city does not necessarily have to own a car, but can easily book, so find, book, pay different vehicle modes which are able to transport him faster to his destination than owning an individual car. And the end of this vision is that this is fueled by automated mobility. And therefore, this vision I call a disruptive idea. And it could also be developed in the mode of a target problem solving. Because, so the first idea is, what is the unique benefit of mobility as a service? And you can identify two unique benefits. The first is that they provide a seamless end-to-end journey, so kind of multimodal journey planning, which you can also, which are available by Google Maps at the moment. But over the services Google Maps offered, easy transaction That means that you can book a certain vehicle, that you can also pay it. So that are all the transaction functions. Then the payment could be flexible, also to split the bill between different passengers. There could be employed a dynamic journey management with real-time data. So if you miss a train, that you instantly get the option of taking another vehicle, and also personalization functions, like suggestions based on your preferences, that you instantly, based on your history, get the vehicle modes or the payment preferences you usually use. So this is called seamless end-to-end journeys. And on the other hand side, you need, in order to make this kind of service marketable, you have to provide a variety of transport modes, vehicles, which are really useful for the customer needs. So it's not only about e-mobility, which is employed very much in this context, but it's also shared mobility and automated mobility, but based on the user needs. And by providing these services according to your user preferences, this is what I call targeted problem solving. In order to give you also an example, so one of the leading providers of MaaS services is Wim, and I want to give you an impression of what they mean by seamless end-to-end journeys.
The Wim app makes going places easier than ever. A monthly fee covers all your journeys with everything from buses, trains, taxis, brand new cars, bikes, and more. Wim takes away the hassle of traveling. It has it all: planning, routing, and tickets. You can create a monthly package to match your needs or just pay as you go. So how do you travel with Wim? It's simple. Enter your destination, and Wim combines the best transport options to take you door to door. It tells you when it's time to go and shows your moves on a map. The more you use Wim, the better it gets. It remembers your favorite places, syncs with your calendar, and plans your journeys in advance. Still, Wim is as spontaneous as you are. Fancy a film at the last minute? Grab a cab on a whim. All you need to do is press one button. Once the taxi arrives, just show your ticket and enjoy the ride. It even rewards you for making green choices. Wim frees you to move whenever and wherever you want, but it also makes your city a better place to live with less traffic jams and cleaner air.
Okay, and this is what this video showed was basically the front end of mobility as a service platform to the user. In the back end, you have to choose what kind of vehicle modes do you want to integrate and are you able to integrate. There might be shared cars, so car sharing services, trains, buses, BRTs, bicycles, scooters, but it's not the number of options which is key here, but rather how these vehicle options or transport options can solve problems users have when commuting to the city. And this requires market research. And we have now different means which offer different benefits to different preferences of users. And here you choose what you need on a minimal basis and what you can get. This is the hard political task here on the backside of a MaaS solution. But also a MaaS solution, at least on a very basic scale, can be developed by a serendipitous discovery of solutions, and this is the P2P carpooling, which you know of BlaBlaCar, and this has also developed very similarly to Uber. I will show you that.
Human connection. It's an interesting place to end up when you started thinking about efficiency. The story goes that Fred, our founder, created BlaBlaCar after struggling to get a train home from Paris for Christmas. On the road, he realised that even though all the trains were full, many of the cars were empty. An idea was born. But what is often overlooked in this story is where Fred was headed. Fontenay-le-Comte, France, population 15,000. It's incredibly frustrating to get to. You know this struggle. It's one of those places where you need to drag your luggage down the street, to catch the bus, to get to the metro, to get to the station, to wait on the platform, to catch a train that stops once a day at the closest big city. Where you then wait at a bus stop to ride to the next nearest town so you can wait again for another bus that has 16 other stops before finally reaching your town centre. And then you're not even done. You still need to walk a mile, hail a taxi or bribe a family member to collect you. It's exhausting just thinking about it. Without a car, it's just hard and absurd. But it's the way it is, isn't it? What if you didn't have to go into town to get out of town? What if you removed the hurry up and then wait? What if going the last minute wasn't the most expensive minute? What if you didn't have to change 3 times to get there? What if you could leave all that behind? That sounds good, doesn't it? But how do you do that? By connecting with someone who's nearby and going the same way. Like your neighbour who leaves every Friday at 7 p.m. Or the guy who owns your favourite cafe taking off the weekend. Or the girl in the office next door heading out the door. Your destination is on her way. On his. On theirs. The convenience of a car without having a car. Over the last 10 years, this is what we've focused on. A people-powered network. A network that connects one of 60 million members with another one. One with a car and one without. Making it possible for them to get literally anywhere directly. No matter how remote. Quite easily and quite affordably. People riding together. Sounds sensible and awkward, right? And yet 87% of our members say they had enriching exchanges along the way. Humans connecting through conversation and through the power of what happens when we get together. When we do, we can go further together. Reintroducing BlaBlaCar. Now we look on the outside how we feel on the inside.
And this BlaBlaCar idea can be called also a mobility as a service on a very basic level. And you could see how this idea developed. Also, it was one idea which stemmed from a personal problem. And also here, this was not shown in the video, the founder didn't make a big business plan or a targeted problem solution, but he just built an idea by means of a paper prototype. It was called Commuto, the way you go. And this paper prototype he tested with real users to see if he got people to sign in, and he got people which signed in. And this was the learning experience that this idea worked in the market. So also a different approach for solution ideation, but a very fruitful approach, as you could see in the video. And this approach you can also develop further. So if you take the idea of BlaBlaCar, which means social network and shared cars, you could also employ this or transfer this idea to commuters commuting to work. Imagine if you have publicly owned minibuses which carry from 5 to 9 people, and where people can sign up online, have a unique card to access all kinds of public transport, and can act as passengers but also as drivers. Then you might devise a system or model where the minibus picks up the people commuting to work, go to work, and in the idle times, these minibuses could also be used by other users. And if you are also possible to provide a fast lane for these minibuses, this has a unique advantage over individualized motorized transports. So this is just one step more, the development of the idea of carpooling, peer-to-peer carpooling, which is governed publicly. This hasn't been introduced yet. It's a paper idea, but this could be also grouped as a disruptive idea by means of serendipitous discovery of solutions and a peer-to-peer carpooling idea. Okay, this was now I showed you 4 examples how solution ideation could work, either by improving traditional solutions or by creating disruptive ideas on the one hand side, and on the other hand side by employing a systematic problem solving approach, or by just experience problems, building a prototype, and then trying to validate the prototype by real market data. General ideation methods, which are usually suggested in the design thinking approach, on the one hand side brainstorming or mind mapping, just as a method you can employ. Another one I showed you also is the morphological box. When you have a solution and you are thinking about what are the options of these solutions you could choose from, you simply line up all the options according to defined categories, and then you connect the boxes. This is a kind of a morphological box. I also introduced the value proposition analysis, where you start with understanding the stakeholders on the right side and then try to address the gains and pains of users you experienced by designing a new product and service for transport. And a fourth method which is suggested in the design thinking approach are co-creating sessions, and this is together with customers or users, and this yields the way for serendipitous solutions where you listen to customers, to their problems, and where prototypes can then be developed and validated. When you have created a number of solutions, then the final step would be to evaluate them and to select one solution or one solution option in order to prototype it. And the main evaluation criterion for your solutions is marketability. One method in order to select one solution is the method of the decision matrix. What you need in order to do the decision matrix is you need decision factors. and the decision factors are derived from user preferences. So what are user preferences regarding mobility, for example? The second one is the weighting of the decision factors. So you need to know for your user segment what is key for them. Is it more the proximity issue? Is it timeliness? Is it the rapidity? Is it comfort? According to the user preferences, you can then put weighting factors to the decision factors and then rate in what way a solution fulfills these demand or these decision factors. And then you multiply the weighting factors with the rating factor. You sum up the product, and then you can see here, for example, that solution B fits the user preferences best. So the decision matrix is a method which enables you to bring different decision factors, money as well as comfort issues, into one system and to compare them. So this is very often used also in master theses, and my recommendation is to use this if you have devised 3 different solutions, to select one for the prototyping phase. The key messages are regarding the ideation phase, that in the ideation phase different solutions, and I use plural here, so you should at least design 2 or 3 solutions or solution options for addressing the stakeholder needs. This is the key task of the ideation phase. Then I told you that there are different strategies for solution ideation. They can be categorized according to the level of innovativeness, so either improving existing solutions or creating disruptive ideas. And they can also be categorized according to the methods applied, either targeted problem solution or serendipitous discovery. Then I showed you some methods you can use for ideating solutions, which reach from classical methods like brainstorming, brainwriting, morphological boxes, to newer ones like the value proposition approach, or co-creating sessions together with users and other stakeholders. And thirdly, I also introduced one method for evaluating the solutions and selecting one of them for prototyping, and this is the decision matrix. The recommendation is to ideate at least 2 or 3 different solutions or solution options and to evaluate them, because then you have a number of options you can choose from, and you might also be able to combine them. Thank you very much.